Hi, and welcome to part 7 of our PowerShell Universal tutorial series. In the last couple videos, we've seen how to create apps in PowerShell Universal. So we've seen how to create GUI or web interfaces using PowerShell Universal, using the designer and the code view. Today, we're going to be adding more to our code view application. We're going to be adding a table element in here. Table elements are very handy, especially for displaying large amounts of data and almost displaying like a SQL-esque table of information that we can query either services, we can query Active Directory and display this data very, very nicely in a table. And the user can actually interact with this table, export data, search it. We can have multiple pages. So it can be very, very handy in your applications to have such tables to actually display to your users what you're trying to show them. So let's actually go ahead and let's get started here. So I've already gotten into the PS1 of our GUI application, which right now, if we just look at our GUI application right now, we just have a simple label and a button. What we're going to be adding is we're going to be adding a table, and we're going to be seeing a few tables. Say we're going to be creating two different tables today. We're only going to have one by the end of the video. We're going to make a simple one first, and then we're going to go ahead and gather some information from Active Directory in our second one. But you can definitely do this with, instead of our get AD user, you'd be able to do a get service or any other get methods to be able to get that information from somewhere. Even if you wanted to display a file server information, maybe you want to display a table of different files that are on a specific location, you can do that as well. So let's go ahead and let's get started. So for us to make our simple table, what we first need to do is create some data for that table. So let me just zoom in here to the code so you guys can actually see what's going on here. And we're just going to create a simple variable here, and we're going to make it equal an empty array. We're just going to name it data for now. And then we're just going to insert some data into this data variable. So we're just going to do a data plus equals, and then the @ symbol, and then a pair of curly brackets. And we're just going to add in here a name. And we're just going to put JackedProgrammer in here for the name. ID, we are going to put 014. And then for the email, we are going to go ahead and put that as jp2022@example.com. And let's go ahead and let's just copy this entry here. We're just going to make one more entry here, and we're going to name this user here as just a John Doe. The ID will be 001, and then we're going to do a jd2022@example.com. So we have our sample data here. Now this could be anything. You don't have to make it the exact same data as this. But this is just going to help us kind of build out our table and be able to show you guys what is possible with the tables here. So to create our table, as you've probably already guessed it, it's going to be a new -ud table. And I want to just put our ID as example here. So our ID is just going to be example. What it should really be is TBL example. I always like to use the 3-letter acronyms at the beginning just so you know exactly what it is, kind of like BTN for button and LBL for label. So we have our table example, and then we're going to have to go ahead and we're going to create some columns here. And the columns need to be in an array. So we're going to open up our array here by doing the @ symbol and then the open and close parentheses. And here is where we're going to put all of our columns here. So we're going to do a new table, new -ud table, and there's a new UD table column. And then we're going to put in the property parameter, and the property for this we're going to put as name. And then we're also going to assign it a title, and we're going to put the title here as name. And then all I'm actually going to do is copy paste this 2 more times so we don't have to type it all back out here, and then change the other properties to ID and email and the title accordingly. So we're going to have ID and email here. Now, after the array of columns, what we're going to want to do is load in the parameter of data, and we're going to store that as our data variable. So we're going to be putting our data variable into our table. And let's go ahead and let's actually just save this here. And let's minimize the code here, and let's go into our application. So here is our table. So we have our data here nicely displayed. We can clearly see our 2 things, our 2 users, our IDs, our emails, the names. You can see them all, but we don't have very many options in here by default. And that's because you need to activate any extra features that you really want as part of this table. So let's go back into the code here, and we can actually add a bunch of different options here. So if we do a dash, you're going to see a bunch of different properties. We can do a show refresh. We can do a show search. And let me actually just zoom in here once again, just so you guys can actually see what's going on. So we have a show refresh, a show search, show selection, show sort. And we're going to see there's actually more options if we go into the columns, but let's go ahead and let's just do a show search here. And we're also going to do a show export. And actually, while we're at it, let's do a show filter as well. So once we actually get all of those in there, let's do a save and let's go check out our application. So as we can already tell, we have our search and we have our export, but we don't really see any filters yet, and that's okay. We shouldn't be seeing them yet either. But now if I try to search for JackedProgrammer here, if I type in Jacked, nothing comes up. But we do know that if we don't search anything, JackedProgrammer is there, but for some reason, as soon as we type Jacked, it does not come up. There's actually a reason for this. And on top of that, if we actually export our data here, let's export all as CSV. Let's open up this new CSV file that it downloaded. We're going to see it's actually empty. Now, there's actually reasons for all of these things. And that is because let's go back into our code here, back into our table. The secret thing is we actually have to add these on the columns themselves as well. So if we want to be able to search on the name column, on the new UD table column after the title, we also need to do the include in export and include in search for those to be actually included in the search or included in the export, as stated in whichever parameter that you're actually adding. But also, we need to do the show filter to be able to actually filter on that property as well. So what I actually want to do is I want to include all the columns in my export. So we can include in export. I really only want to search on the name, and maybe I'll want to search on the email as well. So let's include the email in the search. And then the filter, let's do the filter on the name, and let's also do the filter on the email as well. And let's see what that looks like now. So let's hit save, and let's go back into our application. So here we are. So here we actually have the filters at the bottom here. So we can do Jacked, and it actually does work. If we do a 2022, we get both. If we do a J, we still get both. And then as soon as we do D, it limits it to John Doe. We can do the search up here. If we do Jacked, it works fine. If we do Doe, it works fine. But if you do the JD 2022, it also works because it searches on that. But if we went and did 14, we won't get any records because we don't search on the ID field. But now if we actually go ahead and try to do our export here, export all as CSV, and we go ahead and we open up this CSV file, because we've included all the columns in our export, we actually get every single column and all the data back in our export. So that's very, very handy. Could be very good for your users, your end users, to be able to do this depending on your application. Maybe you want to give them that ability. Now, there are still a lot of other functionalities that are in the table, as you've probably seen, with all the different parameters here. So we could do the show pagination, which will show the different pages when you have a lot of different results. That'll be really useful. We can do a show refresh to be able to refresh the table anytime you want. We can do a show selection to be able to pick items in the table. And we can also do a show sort to be able to sort the different columns here. So let's go ahead and let's just save that. Once again, minimize out of the code and go back into our application. And as you can see here, now we can actually sort on the name, we can sort on the ID, we can sort on the email. We have the number of rows per page. We have the pagination here as well. And we have our little refresh button. And we have our selection. And by default, you can multi-select. But as you probably guessed it, if we go back into our code here, we can actually do a disable multi-select. So we can actually disable multi-select, hit save. And now if we go back into our application, if we select John Doe, if we select JackedProgrammer, it automatically unchecks John Doe afterwards. Now, what is also very handy with this, as you probably get where I'm going at this point, is similarly to the button, we can actually have an event trigger when we select these different rows. So let's go ahead and let's try that out here. So let's go back to our code. And all we're going to want to do is then do a on row selection and then open and closing curly brackets. Let's just zoom in a little bit more in here so you guys can see what's going on. Now, the way that we actually get what row and the data that was selected from the row, we can create a variable. We're going to create it just, let's create it by using the name here. So let's create a variable called name. We're going to make that equal to event data dot name. Now we're getting the dot name from these properties here. So you can easily change whatever property you want to get with the dot notation. And then all we could do is set UD element. And we already know that our label is called LBL hello from the previous video. And we can go ahead and we can modify the properties here for that. And do text equals use name, not username, just name. All right, so once we actually do that here, we can save and we can go back to our application. We just refresh it, make sure it's refreshed. If we select JackedProgrammer, we get JackedProgrammer. If we select John Doe, we get John Doe. And if we do the click me option, we get hello world, and then we get JackedProgrammer or John Doe. So that actually works really, really good. Now we have the refresh, but in our case, our data is very, very stale. There's nothing that's going to be really updated here. Well, let's go ahead and let's do a better example here on when we can actually use this refresh button. So let's go ahead and let's just erase all this data here. And for the data, what I actually want to do, instead of referencing the data here, I'm going to reference just the $ open and close parentheses. And we can actually then go ahead and do a get AD user filter star. So this way it gets all the users, and we're going to specify our server here. And we're going to go ahead and specify some properties. So the properties that I definitely want are name, employee ID, and Sam account name. Now we're going to have to modify our columns here because our ID is now going to be employee ID. But we can keep our title the same because that doesn't really change. We can make it, for the sake of doing it, we can put employee ID, which we will. But you don't actually have to change the title because it's really only the property that you're referencing. And then the property here is going to be email. We're going to change that from email to Sam account name because that's what we're getting back from Active Directory. And in the title, we're going to put that as username because most people would know that as your username. A lot of people that aren't technical might not know what a SAM account name is. So once we actually have that here, let's go ahead and let's hit save. And let's minimize this and let's go back into our application here. And we can already see our table has updated with our new employees here. So we have all of our employees here. And then we have our default Active Directory users, of course. And once again, we can always search on this here. So we can search for employee and we find all the employees. Now, what's very, very nice is let's go ahead and let's just open up Active Directory real quick here. Let's go ahead and let's create a new user. And let's just go ahead and call it test employee 4. And the username is we're going to put test employee 4 here. And let's say that the user cannot change password. Password never expires. And let's say the password is going to be this. That should meet the requirements. All right, so now that we have our new user in here, let's go ahead and let's refresh the table here. You're going to notice that it just spins forever and ever. It will never actually refresh the table. And that is because the show refresh parameter and the refresh button here directly on the table is only for server-side loaded tables. We're going to cover that in the next video because server-side processing on the tables is quite different. It changes the way that the sorting works, the pagination works, the filtering works, and also the searching does not work with server-side tables. Has to be done in a different method, and the exporting also has to be done in a different method. So we'll be covering that in the next video. But luckily, with PowerShell Universal, there's always a workaround on how we can actually work around this. So let's go ahead and let's just refresh the page just to actually confirm. We do see 7 records now when the table loads in automatically, which is perfect. That's what we want. So let's go ahead and let's go back into our code here and see how we can add our own refresh button here. So let's go ahead and let's just remove the show refresh for now, not to confuse our users. And the only thing that we actually need to do is add a new UD button. And then we're going to add the ID here of BTN refresh. And we have to make sure that we put some text in there as well. So we're going to put the text of refresh here. And then we're going to do an on click. And we're going to do an open and close curly bracket. And then what we're going to want to do is we're just going to want to copy exactly the data that we're getting for the table here. And we're going to want to do a set UD element ID. And here we're going to want to reference our table. So we're going to do TBL example. And we want to set the properties of this table. So we want to do an at symbol and then the curly brackets. And we want to set the data property to be our getAD user. So let's go ahead and let's save that once again here. And we can go ahead and we can shrink that once again. And let's go back into our application. So we have our little refresh button. If we click refresh, nothing much really happens because our data in Active Directory hasn't changed. But let's go ahead, let's go back in here. Let's actually delete our test employee 4. So we still have 7 records here. Once we click our refresh button, we only have 6. The test employee 4 has actually disappeared. So There is a very, very easy workaround around the refresh, the show refresh, if you want to load your data in this way instead of the server side processing. There might be times in your scenario where the server side processing tables are going to be beneficial. I haven't encountered those just yet. I usually use this data method here. So I find with the setUD method, you can really do pretty much anything that you want and just use the built-in table functions for everything else. It keeps it much, much simpler. We're going to see with the server side loaded tables, the code becomes not extremely long, but a lot longer than what we have here to do the same thing. So that's why I usually opt for this method. It keeps it very easy to read for the next person that might go in and modify your code to update the application. But that is really the tables. So we were able to add pages, add filtering, add sorting, add searching, add exporting, and do a live refresh of the data. As long as the data isn't hard coded into your application, a refresh button is very handy if you're getting information from services or from Active Directory or anything that might have live data in it. It is very, very handy. Or maybe you're actually fetching information from a SQL Server database and you want to show the information to the user in a safe method. This would be great. We also saw how we can do the selection and have it update another field based on what you select in the table as well. And in the next video, we're going to take a look at the server-side tables and server-side loaded tables. And then we're probably going to take a look at a few more elements just to get familiar with PowerShell Universal before we jump into our project. If you guys have any specific elements that you guys would like us to look at in the next video, please let me know in the comment section down below, and I'll be sure to make a video for that element. It might come after the project, depending on when you ask and where we are in the filming of the project. But I think you guys will have a lot of fun in making this project. It will be something that will be usable in a work environment right off the bat for help desk technicians or anything like that, which is very, very handy. And please, if you haven't hit that subscribe button, hit that like button as well. Please do. That definitely helps the channel and helps get the content out there. And I know that everyone's been kind of checking out the live streams lately, so I really appreciate that. One little update on the live streams. They're probably going to start at 11:30 now time at the Eastern Standard Time. I'll probably make an announcement. I'll make the announcements all the time on the live streams about that as well. But please hit that subscribe button, hit that like button. Also, don't forget to hit that notification bell to be notified when that next video comes out. And I will see you guys on the next video.